short notice, and he's actually, I think of him as my earthbound savior, because he's just stepped in so many times to bail me out. Dennis Bolen is a man for all seasons, a writer for all readers. His literary acumen has encompassed many genres, and finally, he has tackled the genre of poetry and given it wings. His newly released volume of poetry, Black Liquor, published by Caitlin Press, continues his exploration of modern disconnection and the disparate paths taken by those railing against the austere landscape of their lives. Bolen writes in the pacey cadences of contemporary speech, tough and tender. His quirky use of metaphorical story charged with biting imagery makes these deeply autobiographical poems an exhilaration. His previous writings include 5 novels and 2 collections of short fiction, among them Stupid Crimes, originally published by Anvil Press, Stand in Hell, Random House, Caspoit, Anvil Press, and anticipated results, RCLAS Press. See, all these publishers get in line and wait for the next book and say, I want it, I want it. So Dennis has certainly had a myriad of publishers, and they all would like to keep him, but he spreads around the wealth. There's been reviews and praise for Dennis, his previous books, and they include the following. The Quill Inquirer says, a writer at the top of his game. It's hard not to go back and savor each story a second time. Publishers Weekly, Bolen's spare prose and empathy for his characters make for a compelling book. National Post, Raymond Carver states avidly, tightly integrated structure following neatly from thesis to antithesis to synthesis. Canada.com most closely resembles a synthetic cubist painting. Stylistically, reading Bolen is a pleasure. Those were testimonials to Dennis E. Bolen, the writer. But there is another side to Dennis Bolen. Dennis Bolen, the man I've come to know. Dennis is one of the most knowledgeable, talented, and creative people I know. But over and above this, Dennis has a heart of gold and will always come to your rescue if it's at all humanly possible. I don't know how many times I've counted on Dennis to assist me with literary events, and even if I call him in the 11th hour, he's always come through to help me in my literary endeavors. He's a wonderful talent, a wonderful person, and I just can't say enough good things about him. But I'll stop here now and get on with the main event. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a warm RCLAS welcome to our esteemed keynote speaker, Mr. Dennis E. Bolen.
Well, there's hardly anything left to be said. I gesticulate a lot, so can I get away without a microphone?
Yeah.
Everybody here?
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Oh, my goodness me. Thank you
I wish I
very
had
much.
hours, but I had to.
And I want everybody to know it's quite all right, the fact that I'm your second choice today. It's not, doesn't hurt my feelings.
No, you're too busy, we thought. Dennis. We would have asked you first. You're just too busy.
Yeah, at least I'm your second choice, but at least I'm a choice. That's important when you're writing. Of course, I'm sure everybody here has found that out. I prepared a few comments today. Much of what I've got to say is true. Many of you will have had similar experiences to the ones I've had in the great world of living and observing and thinking and writing and rewriting and publishing and listening and performing and helping and mentoring and joining groups like this. thank goodness I finished that list. I absolutely hate gerunds. I can't stand saying them, but I don't like. I particularly don't like them in writing, particularly poetry. But what I'm saying here comes through the filter of Dennis E. Bolen. I mean, Candace was very, very generous in describing me, but I don't know, long about 10 years ago or so, when I became a bit more fogyish than I ever wanted to be, my opinions seemed to ossify a little bit. And so please take everything I say through your own truth filter. Correct me in your own mind, okay? You can correct all my information and slanted information. And I can say that quite confidently because I know I'm in an experienced crowd. I mean, you're a seasoned outfit. And I'm honored to be addressing you on the subject of art and our particular love, writing. And, and why shouldn't we, ladies and gentlemen, Canadian writers, we are now, more than ever, members of a world elite. One of our precious number was only weeks ago awarded the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize. There's no other, there's nothing bigger to go after. Every single one of us, in the instant that award was announced, went up a notch or three on the world pantheon of writing. Think about that. If you're a writer from Canada, all I gotta say is congratulations and long live Alice Munro. Long live Alice Munro. That's fantastic. This is a singular area of Canada we live in. This West Coast. It's particularly live when it comes to the writing instinct. Maybe it's the gloom. The gloomy season, which today is perfect to be delivering that kind of line. I'm not sure whether it's not it's a constant rain and overcast that's scientifically traceable to a greater output of sonnets and villanelles than any other given ecology, but I'm told there's a lot to be said for desert climates. I haven't tried that out yet, but let me know if anybody has. What we have here is a live, written art scene that flexes daily. You guys are a perfect example of it, practical example of it. It inhales and exudes our chosen love, the written word beside the written word, to form a phrase and an image and the narrative and the concrete evocation of our lives here on the wet coast. And I've got there's a good example, a little bit historical example I can give you. This past summer I was lucky enough to be chosen to introduce the winner of one of Pandora's Collective's awards for Publisher of the Year. I'll tell you the story. I'm going to drop a lot of names here, so get ready. The story goes back to the 60s and a thing called the Georgia Strait Writing Supplement. Does anybody remember that? No? The Georgia Strait Writing Supplement. That was back when the Georgia Strait was an underground newspaper and the police were always confiscating it because of pornography and drug advertisements and stuff like that. In the Georgia Strait Writing Supplement, people like Stan Persky and Milton Acorn and Jack Spicer and George Stanley and Robin Blazer would routinely publish. Then after the Georgia Strait Writing Supplement, that organization began publishing books under the name of the Georgia Strait Writing Series. And Bill Bissett was first published there, and Judith Copperthorne, and Fred Waugh, who's the current parliamentary poet laureate, and Brian Fawcett, and George Bowering, and Daphne Marlatt, just to name a few. Am I dropping names here?
Keep on real.
I've met all these people and I'm friends with them. You know what they're dead. No. That evolved into a thing called the York Street Commune. It was the 60s, man. You had to be there, man. And they all lived, a lot of them lived together. Bowring talks about it, like crazy. And they developed a book publishing project called the Vancouver Community Press. And they cranked out books about everything, etc. By 1974, it started to crumble up and it morphed into something else. And their editorial focus began to emphasize nonfiction titles about current affairs and politics. And then they published a largely positive account of the People's Republic of China. Remember, this was the Cold War. And that inspired another name change, New Star Books. That's how they got their name. That's how they got their name. Yeah. In 1990, Rolf Moore, a good friend of mine, assumed the role of publisher of New Star Books. And nowadays they publish politics and social issues and poetry, prose, fiction, everything you can think of. And if you frequent any bookstore in the big city, in Vancouver, and perhaps even out here, the used bookstores, you might run into this diminutive little balding fella, Rolf. He's a tireless bookman and a congenial host, literary party host, etc. He's a thoroughgoing booster of all that is literary. He's facilitated, assisted, rescued, and resurrected many a writer's career. He's now a man in his 50s, probably his late 50s. He does not have a pension. He has no real estate. He even, given the vagaries of the Canada Council and BC Arts Council, he doesn't even have a steady paycheck. And yet he continues to monitor this. I mean, this is just one example. I mean, you've got Anvil Press, you've got Ronsdale, Mother Tongue, Brindle and Glass, Oolican, you've got Leaf Press, Caitlin Press, Sonu Nice, Silver Bow, Livros Libertat, Arsenal Pulp, Harbor, you got the late Douglas and McIntyre and all the fragmented little houses that have resulted from the ashes of their demise. And forgive me for the ones I haven't mentioned, I know there's others. So why do they do it if there's no money in it and there's no great personal future? Well, Rolf Moore and the others, they keep at it, despite the fact that book sales are declining year by year. And there's some interesting statistics on that. This is the depressing part of the According to an outfit called the Nielsen Book Scan, book sales around the world are in general decline. Sales in the U.S. in 2012 were down 9.3%. Spain was 10.3%. South Africa 8.8%. Italy 7%. Even the UK fell by 3.4%. Now, Spain and Italy and those kind of places, you can blame the recession for that. But the U.S. claims its economy is in recovery. So what's going on? And earlier this year, the New York Times op-ed pages called out Mexico and labeled it the country that stopped reading. There's no stats in this study on Canada. And no clear indication what e-book sales are doing to paper book sales. That's paper book sales, those statistics that I was talking about. But it would seem that the world is changing. There's a lot of general reading that goes on, as of course, everyone knows. And the publishing industry innovates like crazy. I'm sure you know that too. The digital age, e-books, online content, blogs up the wazoo. Who reads blogs? Who writes blogs? I don't know. Who could ever write or read as many blogs as there are to read? I don't get it. So there seems to be a huge refraction of it all, which is another reason why I love an outfit like yours, because there's a concentration of effort here, which I'm certain is a positive aspect of the way writing and art generally is morphing these days. Something else is being lost, though, in fostering the literacy and the love of books. There's a larger social and economic changes afoot. One thing, though, about it all is for certain. Without a strong dedication to books and reading, societies, all nations, the world, mankind, will be the poorer for it. We all know that. That's why organizations like yours are so important. I should talk about myself.
Please do.
My own example might be illustrative about, something. I was very, very lucky, actually. I first studied creative writing in the late 60s. I did like everybody else. My first published work was a poem in the school annual, high school annual. But I forgot to put my name on it. So it's in there, and I'm the only person on earth that knows that that's my poem. They printed it, but they didn't put a name on it. It'll be a collector's item someday.
Be worth a fortune.
You decided?
Posthumously.
Do some research, find out where I went to high school. I graduated from the University of Victoria in 1977 with a degree in, a partial degree, mostly in creative writing, but a bit of social work also. And there were no jobs for creative writers. Can you believe it? Not then, and I don't think even now, although things are a little bit better now with the schools. The schools at least understand that if you're going to train people to write, and it's not a journalism thing, then you'd better set up some sort of framework for them to at least attempt to go into. So there's cooperative programs now in most schools that run creative writing schools now. This is before my time. Most people who are seriously studying creative writing and doing very well at it now will be moved into at least an internship job with a small press or something like that kind of gets them into the industry, etc. But so I took a job not in writing, but that involved a lot of writing. I was a federal parole officer in Vancouver from the late 70s until I retired 13 years ago in the year 2000. 23 years at it, and people say, "Oh, you must have a lot of things to write about if you had, you were in the crime business for all those years." Yes, I do. The trouble is, there's too many things. It's absolute overload. You'll know yourself. There's, especially if you write novels. A novel. Mordecai Richard always used to say this. He said, "Yeah, sure, I can write you a novel. I'll go upstairs and I'll come back down 3 years later." And it might be good, or it might not be, but it's 3 years out of my life, So it's a very serious business, writing novels. But I wrote novels, and I managed to get the first one published. No publisher would have anything to do with it. It's called Stupid Crimes, and it's more or less a short story novel. It's very episodic and short story, so it creates a novelistic arc, but it's more short stories than it is a novel. But there's an argument anyway. Which is actually a form I quite like. It's somewhat of a distinctive, the Canadian form in the fact that a lot of us do that. But I was having no success finding a publisher for this book. But I ran into a guy named Brian Kaufman. We were in a bar, and we started talking, and by golly, it turned out that he was going to Langara College and really loved literature, and he'd started up a desktop publishing company. This is the infancy of a desktop. This is 1988-89. And he had a big machine, and he had printers and all this kind of stuff, et cetera, to do stationery and envelopes and things like that. But he wanted to branch out into literature. So we decided to form an alliance. He was putting out a little literary magazine called Subterrane, which in those days was an odd-sized little thing, and it only came up. He put up 2 issues in 3 years. It didn't have any frequency enough. It didn't have anywhere near enough frequency to acquire some kind of an audience. Anyway, we published. We formed Anvil Press together, and we cranked out like a book, and it was called The Toilet Paper. It was a small little pamphlet, and it was a linguistic study of 4 words referring to gaseous and solid wastes. It was a big hit over Christmas of 1989. It was a tiny little book, and it was the color of Russian toilet paper, which is to say it was craft paper, and it was humorous and yet informative, and it was 40 pages, and it sold on the. It was an impulse buy on the counter at Monroe's Books in Victoria, and what was the big bookstore down in Vancouver on Robson Street? Duffy's.
Duffy's, yeah.
And yeah, they agreed to take it, and they said, "Oh, okay." Well, and it was a good impulse buy. I think it was stuffed into a lot of stockings. And I think every Christmas since then, I see it once in a while.
Really?
Yes, it's an interesting little book. The second book that we put out was my own book, Stupid Crimes, and we mailed it all out to all the outlets in Canada, and it got reviewed in the Globe and Mail, and it was the editor's choice in the Globe and Mail the third week of May 1992, and that was the beginning of my career. And I got a call from a guy who wanted to buy the film rights, and I got an agent in Toronto who got me in the door at Random House with a 3-book deal. They reissued Stupid Crimes as a vintage paperback, and they put out my hardcover historical novel called Stand in Hell. They put out Volume 2 of Stupid Crimes, which is called Corrections. And after 3 books, I still hadn't caught on, so I got fired there, which is kind of the standard thing. You can watch a lot of careers trajectories that way. So I came back to Vancouver publishing. I never left Vancouver physically. I was told to move to Toronto, but I didn't listen.
Yeah.
I was just back there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I always have a good time, but I get off the plane here and take a deep breath and think,
yeah.
that. Anyway, so I came back here and I cranked out a book of short stories. We did that with Anvil Press. Anvil Press, by that time, I had left Anvil Press as an entity, and Brian had kept it going. And it was becoming big. It was becoming a monster by that time, and it is even more of a monster now. But so he put out a short story book called Gas Tank and Other Stories, and then after that, I disappeared for 7 years. I didn't put out another book. I had a lot of reasons. I wanted to make the next book very, very... I had cranked out 4 books in 6 years, which is enough. That's fast enough. That's quick enough. 1 every 18 months. That's almost artificially fast for a serious novelist, I think, anyway. So 7 years go by, and I finally put out Volume 3, the conclusion of the Stupid Crime series. So there's 3 novels there. It was about my life on the street, working with criminals, and seeing Vancouver develop from a small city to a metropolis. And it spans the years, probably, you could say it spans the years 1980 to the years 2000. Right? So this book came out in 2005, and it's called Toy Gun. And it's my big, one of my literary executors that I always filter my stuff through calls it my opus maximus. It'll be the biggest book that I will ever put out. After that, I wrote another book. It's an odd little thing that was inspired by the missing women case, because I felt that the media perception of what was happening with the pig farm and all this kind of stuff, it was way, way, way over the top sensational and wasn't actually getting down to what might actually be going on. So I wrote a fictional version of what I thought might be going on through my parole officer and novelist lens. I wrote that. That's still around. You can find it probably in the library upstairs. And my last fiction book was Anticipated Results, which Candace was kind enough to read a couple of reviews from. Quill and Quire quite liked it. A novelist or a writer at the top of his game, which sounds like maybe from here on it's downhill, which I'll attempt not to. But a few years ago, I started going to poetry readings, mostly because a reviewer actually at the UBC radio station was reviewing Anticipated Results said, "Oh, he describes his car crash, and over here it gets really poetic." And she read out this passage that was poetic, and I almost fell off my chair. Poetic? I mean, I could do poetry. So I started going to poetry readings, started coming regularly to Poetic Justice every Sunday afternoon here at Heritage Grill at 3 o'clock. It's a fantastic thing. It's a wonderful institution of art that we have in the Lower Mainland. And writing some things and trying them out with the audience there. And after a couple of years, I had a book-length manuscript. I started sending it around. And Caitlin Press, which heretofore had been more or less a rural and feminist-centered point of view press, got in touch And they said, I actually have a friend of a friend of a friend. It's very important to have friends of friends of friends in this business, who got it in front of them. And in a week, they actually accepted it. This was last April, and boom, it's been out now for a month. It was a whirlwind publishing project. Very, very proud of this book. Anyway, the point of telling you all this incredible story is that I went from, I wrote my first novel on a typewriter, and now I don't write anything other than on a computer. And one of the version of Stand in Hell, which is my hardcover history novel, that was put out by Random House in 1997, was, my editor was in Toronto. We passed the manuscript back and forth via email attachment, which in 97 we weren't quite exactly sure what we were doing. Lo and behold, the version that's between those hard covers that you'll buy in a used bookstore or find in a library is the penultimate version of the novel that I wrote. It was mislabeled. The computer file was mislabeled and ended up being published, and it has all kinds of typos that I didn't put in this, which enrages, drives you crazy, drives you absolutely crazy. So I guess if I have a moral to my own story.
Be careful before you send button.
Anyway, the point of my story is that I went 7 years saying to myself, what am I doing? I mean, should I even keep this up? And I ran into Alan Twigg, actually, at some sort of wine and cheese someplace. And he asked me what I was doing. I said, I've had it. It's just, there's just no point to this anymore. Because you don't make any money. You work like crazy. You hardly, I didn't even get invited to my own city's Writers' Festival for all those years that I was cranking books out in Toronto and stuff like that. I do not know why. If you ever find somebody who can tell me, let me know. But when I finally did get Toy Gun out in 2005, Alan Twigg put my picture, holding a martini of course, on the cover of the bloody magazine. Yes, it was the finest moment of my career. It actually really, it totally remade me. And the point of that story is, and also inside the magazine was a fantastically long and detailed review of Toy Gun by Sheila Monroe, who is Alice's daughter. So I was incredibly honored by that whole thing. My point in that is, writers help writers. It's so important. I needed the help of Alan Twigg, who's also a writer, and he also publishes BC Book World. It's a vitally important piece of literary media that we have in the province. So, anyway, I've actually enjoyed being back at small presses. Caitlin Press, very, very small press, and they hire individual editors for their individual books. I got to know, or to reacquaint myself with a wonderful poetry editor named George Pearley. I don't know if anybody ever knows George. You know George? George is living up in Roberts Creek, and he would have me come up there and stay with him. And we woodshedded this book, weeks and weeks through April and May. It was wonderful. So yeah, I've had a very good run at it. Are you keeping in mind all the names I'm dropping?
Can I drop them?
They are the heroes of our revolution. They are chief in our struggle against obscurity. Obscurity, the kicking against the dying of the light. Is the reason we stand up and read our hard rock words every week in a place like Poetic Justice, and every month at Hogan's Alley reading series, or the Twisted Poets, or the Writing Studio, and all the wonderful, resplendent others. There's lots and lots of reading series. Standing up and reading in public is very important. And it also keeps us connected. It's extremely important to stay connected, especially while being so solitary in your little room writing. Reading in public amongst one's fellows is good practice. It's occasionally tedious. Actually, it's often tedious. Please don't hate me for bringing this up. Some of you may know it's one of my favorite hobby horses to carry on about the do's and don'ts of public readings. I even I led a workshop at, not this last year, but the year before, Summer Dreams Literary Festival on this very subject, about things, the do's and don'ts. You know the boilerplate. Like poems get read aloud. They're different animals as when they're read silently. We go for sound and rhythm, and the best way to get full impact is by pronouncing each word with your entire body. Sound and rhythm don't exist for their own sake. They are there for the listener's enjoyment. And they can also lead you to the subtle meanings in the poems. And a few more tips. Please read slowly and enunciate. Find the importance in each word. Rehearse. Know how long your poems are going to be. Whatever you do, especially if I'm moderating, if I'm running Poetic Justice, do not ever read away a bit and then look up and say, how's my time?
Oh,
I will yank you off the stage so fast. If you've got 5 minutes, rehearse 5 minutes worth and go for it. And above all, don't explain. Please don't explain. Writing and creative writing, and particularly poetry, is a concentrated expression. If it needs an introduction, if it needs to be explained, then it's not very good. It can't be any good. Have the guts to stand up when you're introduced, open up your book or your page, and start reading. And when you're finished, say thank you and sit down. Everybody, if anybody wants to talk to you about it all, they want an explanation, if they want to reflect with it, hang around after the sessions and yak all you want and get them to buy you a drink. It's one good thing. Yeah. Anyway, why am I harping on this? Why am I getting down to such brass tacks? Because good reading performances are important. They're very important to get our art out there. If our performances are not entertaining and edifying and compelling, then we won't have an audience and our art will go nowhere. Years ago, Catherine Owen, who lives here, and Joe Rosenblatt, who lives in Fallen Beach, they collaborated on several projects. But my favorite project of theirs is called The Dog Book. They wrote a nice big book on dogs, poems towards dogs. There's a picture of a dog and then 2 poems, one of hers and one of his. And there's some fantastic writing in there. They had a wonderful book launch on Commercial Drive on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon. Beautiful day, it was May or June. And the doors and windows of the bar, which is called Timber with the R-E on the drive, were open. And they had set up on the stage and they were reading poetry. I was sitting at the bar and watching the stage and watching people walk by. A couple walked in, or they walked by, and they heard a few sounds that they thought they might like, and they saw that the bar was open and the sun was streaming in, and there were empty tables, so they came in and stood at the door of the bar and looked for a place to sit. The man looked towards the stage where Joe Rosenblatt was reading a poem. And at that moment, the look of disgusted terror that crossed his face, the very notion that you'd go into a place of entertainment, a bar or something like that, on a Saturday afternoon, and sit and listen to some guy reading poetry, just like English class? Are you nuts? That was the sense I got from this person. And it's forever told me, look, we must get our art out there, and it must somehow connect with our audience. If we have that kind of resistance going on by just your average person on the street. Anyway, that's nice. We must make it a pleasure to all. There's great benefits to organizations like yours here in doing these things that I say are so important. Most important is writers helping writers. When you get a notice on Facebook that someone's got a review for their book, for God's sake, share it out as far across the world as you possibly can. Get it out there. help other people. In conclusion, there is no conclusion. It's an ongoing thing. Just keep at it. That's my sense. I'd like to thank the Royal City Literary Arts Society for having me come to talk to you today, and for all your persistent activists. And without an organization like this, nothing happens. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm at Poetic Justice tomorrow
Yes,
with my friend Murray and Kevin. And with that, I will wish you all a happy afternoon.
Oh, thank you.
Great speech, Dennis. Watching the clock, I see. Looking over there, I gotta go. He said,
Did I go over time?
no, you did great. You did. Yeah, you're. So what we're gonna do now?